Okay, guys, I'm going to continue reading John R. Rice's book, False Doctrines, on the section on communism and socialism. And we're on the second part of that, which is socialism anti-Christian. And we're on part 4, and that says American business brought prosperity and socialism actually hindered. The man who wrote me says, "For my part, I can't help but admit that the common man has a somewhat better economic life than he has ever had. Traveling about, I see better farm homes. It does seem that our present government is seeking to buy the votes of factory laborers and Negroes and farmers, but we have to admit that these groups were and have been hard-pressed, to put it mildly." Then this friend mentions sawmill workers of the past and others. Number 1, how improved machinery and business enterprise increased wealth. Answer: yes, there has been an improvement in the lot of farmers and of factory workers and of Negroes, as you say, but you are very wrong in supposing that a socialistic program made that improvement. Primarily, that improvement came about by improved machinery, increased production, and by business itself, not by the government. Let me illustrate. In my boyhood, about 60 years ago, I knew men who had worked on farms all their lives. A man was an old man, bent and worn out, at 50 years of age. He had followed a walking, turning plow. A walking cultivator had worn himself out working 12 hours a day for many, many years in the greatest toil. But even in my boyhood, walking plows gave way to riding plows. Instead of a single mule plowing a 6-inch furrow, when I was 10 years old, we had 6 mules to a big triple-disc plow. Here a small boy did 6 times as much work with the modern machinery as a mature man had been able to do before. So farm income went up during those days, long before the New Deal. Today modern farms produce 4 times as much goods per man-hour of work as they did 20 years ago. The natural increase in farm income without government subsidies would have greatly improved farm life. I remember that at the close of World War I, it was thought there was not enough land in America to grow food for the multitudes coming. Now we know that ground can be made to produce much, much more by modern farming methods and with modern machinery. Much marginal land has now been turned back to pasture for this reason. The growth in machinery and in modern methods has brought about a great increase in income per farmer. Likewise in industry, for the average worker, now there are thousands of dollars worth of machinery used. In England, the miners who mine with pick and shovel turn out only a fraction as much as miners turn out in America with modern machinery. Don't credit the New Deal for that. Modern business, so hated by socialists, is responsible for the difference. At one time, men were hired in offices to write out business letters in longhand. Then typewriters came along and greatly increased the output of offices and, of course, increased the wages of workers. Now, instead of dictating to a typist, I am dictating to a machine, saving the typist time. She will work only about half as much in getting this chapter written as she would have a few years ago, when I dictated and she wrote in her shorthand notebook. And at the Sword of the Lord office we have 2 automatic typewriters and can be set to write the same letter over and over again, with one girl running both of them and doing other things besides, and saving lots of time and money, so naturally we can pay more. In every kind of production, American businessmen and American genius and free enterprise have so greatly increased the output per man-hour that income has risen, prices have been made more reasonable relative to income, and the good things of life have been spread among the multitudes. The New Deal had little to do with this, and what it did have to do with it was wrong. Number 2, to take one man's rightfully earned property and give it to others, unearned, to get their votes, is dishonest demagoguery. Let us say that some people, it is true. 1 second. Okay. Let us say that some people, it is true, have appeared to benefit from the New Deal. Farmers have gotten some money that they didn't earn, paid to them in subsidies made up by the rest of the taxpayers. The Muscle Shoals and Tennessee Valley authorities have gotten electricity to common people, some cheaper than other power companies could do so, perhaps. But the rest of us have paid it in taxation, providing funds with less interest than we must make up. With the taxes mounting sky high and with dollars buying less and less, still the government could not keep out of debt. So what really happens is that these people who got government subsidies, who got things they didn't earn from a New Deal government which was buying their votes, simply piled up debts which they and their children will have to pay, or which will topple this government over sooner or later. No one gets something for nothing. Somebody always has to pay, and crooked politicians who buy votes by giving people what they do not earn after taking it away from others who do earn it are doing no favor to America. The truth is that the increase of prosperity was not brought about by the New Deal, but it was brought about by the machine age, by modern civilization, by science applied to daily life, and the government had practically nothing to do with these factors except to hamstring them by public criticism and by enormous taxation and expensive and crippling red tape. Number 5, the larger section here, is corruption, waste, inefficiency, and dishonesty naturally go with socialism. Corruption, waste, inefficiency, and dishonesty naturally go with socialism. Our friend says, again, I say, it seems to me that socialism is a part of destiny, but the corruption and the moral rot and dishonesty are the part of our leaders is what makes socialism seem so nasty. Answer, but you are mistaken, and all sincere socialists are mistaken, in supposing that corruption and moral rot and dishonesty of the New Deal administration does not inherently go with socialism. It does. Socialism never did work successfully, and it cannot work now for several reasons. Number 1, enlightened self-interest expressed in profit and wages are proper motives to work. Enlightened self-interest is a proper motive, and the strongest motive, to get people to work. Wages according to one's work on the part of labor, and profit accord to one's ingenuity and vigilance and careful administration on the part of management. These are God-appointed motives for work. Put 2 people up to work on 2 jobs right across the street from each other and see how it works. Let one man be working under the OPA, the Office of Price Administration System, and paid by the government, irrespective of his merits. Let another man be working at his own job to make money. You will see that private enterprise works better than socialism. It always has been that way, and it always will be that way. Again and again, groups of serious idealistic people, often Christian people, have gotten together to start a communal or collective enterprise where each would work the best he could and all would share alike. They have never succeeded for the simple reason that people do not work well where the law of supply and demand, the Bible law of sowing and reaping, does not have proper play. If people are not paid more for more work, they will not do more work. In management, it works the same way. The post office department runs at a deficit all the time. It is owned by the government, and the Postmaster General's office is used as a reward for political service, so it costs Americans millions of dollars in taxes to keep up our post office system. But side by side with the postal system, the American Express Company, run by private enterprise, does the same kind of work and makes a profit, and it gives better service. If you don't believe it, try 10 different post offices and 10 different express offices and see which place you get the most courteous treatment, the most eager service. Bureaucracy is itself hurtful and wrong and antisocial. If government owns businesses, then a man can keep his job not by doing more work, but by keeping a political pull. Then the boss who has political pull can give jobs to those who pay him a little on the side. He does not have to make the business pay. The government, meaning the rest of us taxpayers, pays all the bills anyway. The more government meddles in business, the more it hires employees. That much more corruption and dishonesty is inevitable. In England, it has been proved beyond any doubt that the steel mills owned by government will not turn out as much steel as when they are controlled by private industry. Coal mines owned by the government and run by the government will not turn out as much coal as when the mines are run by private enterprise. Sorry if I read that twice, I don't know. And as the government succeeds in socializing medicine, hires the doctors and runs the hospitals, then there will be more malingering by people who are not sick but who want attention. There will be more crookedness among doctors. There will be poor service in hospitals and by physicians. Because in taking away initiative in private enterprise and enlightened self-interest and in killing the profit motive, we kill the goose that lays the golden egg. Socialistic government kills moral principle, kills initiative, so that necessarily waste, dishonesty, and higher expenses of government administration inevitably come. For instance, even the poorest people who think they have been helped by government subsidies, money taken away from people that earned it by governments who wanted to use that tax money to buy votes with, would find that if we could rid of all the bureaucracy, the red tape, the waste, and extravagance of a socialistic government, and if we had only the simple primitive government of the United States of 45 or 50 years ago, business would have increased so much more that the commonest working man would have gained far more in actual benefits than he has by the dishonesty of a socialistic government, which has piled billions of dollars of debt upon the people and has grabbed from others their rightful earnings to buy votes of labor and the farmers and other favored classes who had more votes. Actually, we have lost in prosperity, not gained, by the socialism in America. Number 2, wasteful meddling of the New Deal prolonged the Depression, now makes waste, decreases production and prosperity. It is a silly idea advanced by mountebanks and rabble-rousers that President Hoover brought on the Depression and that the New Deal saved America out of that depression. Actually, the exact opposite is the truth. America had great depressions before, but they never lasted more than a few weeks or months at most. But America quickly recovered because the law of supply and demand, the law of sowing and reaping, was allowed to take effect, and even things up so there could be a quick comeback. But with the meddling of Roosevelt and the New Deal, wages in the Union were kept abnormally high, and wherever possible prices were kept high. If men had been allowed to work for whatever they could get, there would not have been unemployment. There was still need for plenty of labor. If farmers had been allowed to sell their goods at whatever the market would bring, they could have sold all their goods. It was silly and wasteful and wicked to kill hogs when people were without food, to plow up one row out of every 3 in cotton, when millions did not have enough clothes, and pay subsidies to the farmers for keeping their products off the market. All this interference with God's own economic laws prolonged the Depression for years, when it would have cured itself automatically in a few months had God's law been allowed to take effect. Men may think that artificial regulation of economy is better than God's law of sowing and reaping, the law of supply and demand, but it's not. There is never any reason for scarcity if we let God's laws work. There are always people who could buy normal amounts of food or grain or steel products and manufactured goods if we let our market find its own level. There are always jobs to be done at proper wages relative to the need if we allow wages to seek their proper level. Artificial pegging of standards that have no relation to God's laws is back of much of our trouble. I am for high wages. I am for big production. I am for normal prices. But let goods sell for what they are worth. Let labor bring what it is worth. Keep the market open. Do not kill the labor market by the closed shop practice. Do not kill the market for goods by pegged high prices. Sometimes in emergency cases, such as in wartime, there should perhaps be a top limit on wages and prices, but that is the unusual thing. And even so, conditions will soon adjust themselves for more demand For the more demand there is for labor, the more labor-saving machines will be installed, and more people will work. And the more demand there is for any goods, the more of those goods will be supplied to make a profit. God's economic laws, like all of God's laws, always work. Interference with these laws and deliberately breaking these laws always brings trouble. It is true that Roosevelt and the New Deal administration and more recent welfare administrations did buy the votes of many people by distributing the wealth, as these socialists called it. That means they took money from someone who had earned it and gave it to others who had not earned it. No doubt there was some charity of heart, but their motives were selfish in the main. They were simply buying votes. And that philosophy fitted their craving to stay in power. But to teach that socialistic measures brought America out of the Depression is silly and contrary to the facts. There would have been far more economic prosperity if men had simply followed God's laws of supply and demand, without such high taxes, without such extravagance and waste and red tape. Number 3, and this is the final part of this section, that is socialism anti-Christian. And this is class hatred so carefully cultivated by liberals, civil rights workers, and communists as wicked, unchristian, and un-American. Another terrible result of socialism is inevitable. That is the setting of class against class. All this talk about dirty capitalists, all this talk of sweatshops, of slave labor shops, referring mendaciously, I don't know that word, but mendaciously to the Taft-Hardy law is wicked. All this setting up of a political party to get the votes of labor, to get the votes of farmers as opposed to other classes is wicked. But that is essentially the doctrine of socialism and the method of socialism. One has a right to suspect the patriotism and the integrity of any man who sets out especially to say he is for labor or for the farmers or for colored people, as if these groups or any other groups should have their champions against the rest of the people. Why not just be for God and the country and for people everywhere? Why not simply be an American and be for Americans? Why should not every man who goes to Congress and every man who seeks the presidency just be for the good of the whole of America? What is good for one is good for all of us. Anything that cripples one part of our nation cripples all of us eventually. To raise racial hate or class hate and to arouse enmity against management, against big business or little business, against capital is essentially wicked and un-American. The man who encourages oppression of big business today will tomorrow be hurting small business and labor. The man who takes away the liberties of any of us will find his own liberties involved sooner or later. If President Truman can illegally seize the steel mills, private property, legitimate and scriptural according to the philosophy of the Bible, tomorrow a president can seize your home or your car or your cow or the sword of the Lord. Socialism necessarily means buying the votes of the group of people who have the most votes by attacking the group that has fewer votes, and that is wrong. It necessarily means higher taxes for people of more enterprise, more education, more hard work, or more genius in order to buy the votes of people with lesser energy or lesser skill or lesser integrity. In other words, socialism is essentially corrupt. It goes against God's law, against Christianity, against the Bible, against true Americanism. It goes against the things that make for good character and prosperity. The corruption and waste and extravagance and debt of the New Deal are a part of the lack of principle involved. They are inevitable with socialism. Okay, guys. That ends that section. That seems like a good stopping point, but the next section is going to be called How Modernism and Religion Fits the Socialist Communist Program. So, I'm learning a lot from this, and you know what? It looks like this next section is going to be kind of short, somewhat, but... And then the next chapter after that is Modernism, Religious Liberalism. That kind of goes along with it. It would be kind of interesting, too. So I'll probably read through that and record that, too. Seems like there's a prayer at the end of this chapter. That's cool. So, all right, that's going to be it for now. God bless.